BSides DC would like to thank all of our sponsors, and a special thank you to all of our speakers, volunteers, and organizers.
So a few things before we begin, just to give you a heads up. I put this here, the disclaimer, about laughter, tears, drooling, anything, that is all okay. If you feel the need to do any of that, go for it. And even though we're discussing a serious matter, I laugh, and I laugh a lot. I am also autistic, but I don't believe that that's the... Oh, you can leave at least one on. Do you want for the video?
Hey, whatever.
With getting the house lights down, that definitely helped.
How's that?
It's very nice, but can they see it on the video?
Hey, it doesn't matter.
Okay. So now we have an official start time. Okay, so welcome. Thank you so much for coming and joining us here. I am Mandy Logan. I go by Survivatrix. It's my Twitter handle, my hacker handle. It was actually selected for me by a hacker group in Las Vegas called Shadow Syndicate. So that is where that name comes from. And if you've read the brief description of what this talk centers on, it is called Courage from an O-Day Inside. And it does discuss some pretty deep physical difficulties that I've had to overcome. Because of the disabilities, I want you to be aware that I may change in my ability to speak. My vision may go out during the talk. That's happened before. I may need to sit down. I may slow down. We may go to pure slides, or if I can't see, it may be pure story time. So I am going to ask that you just work with me on whatever presents right now. First aid has been informed. Everybody knows what to do if I actually did need to completely lay down or something. So there's no immediate threat. Just know that speaking and vision are still issues for me at times. So, Courage from an O-Day Inside. Mandy Logan, and this is, if you want to look up on LinkedIn, that is my LinkedIn. These certifications come from my life prior to the strokes. I worked in environmental and construction engineering and management. Survivatrix spelled with a 517 in there. And we all are all in BSides DC, right? So, okay. This is a deeply personal talk. Why? Because I am a person. And each of you, shockingly enough, is a person. And as we go through this, I want you to identify with the good, the strong, the courage, the parts of this that you can see and apply in your life. So I am an expert in my experience and my choices. Nothing that I bring up here is medical advice, legal advice, any other kind of financial advice. No, it's my experience. Now this is a theory or a mandate that I have used throughout my life. No matter who cuts your check or how you spend your hours, you are your own expert and you work for yourself. Even if somebody else is cutting you a check and they pay your benefits, you are all personally self-employed. You are your own experts and you're your own experts in your life. Even if you make no money, or if you fail at your goal, or you face constant setbacks, you are still your own boss and you are still in charge. Is that showing up? Weird. So I'm going to discuss a time of major, major, major setbacks. How I overachieved to hack my brain and come back. And I have no idea why that's cut off there, but how courage aided in this. So I came to information security kind of in a roundabout way. I am not employed directly in information security or anything at this time. I came to it following the attacks because I went through a very major stalker situation, and I had to learn OSINT and strategic maneuvers and all the things on the fly. This is how I ended up getting into the cyber world, the cyber stalker, law enforcement, and anything having to do with information security. That was my initiation into this world. So I came here from GERCON. It was a really great conference. I definitely recommend going to that. And there were some beautiful talks that were given. One of them, this was a question posed by Mr. Jeff Mann. His talk was, "What are we doing here? Rethinking security." Now, he has 30 plus years in information security, worked for the NSA. He knows this industry. And he posed this question several times: what is security? Everybody's an information security professional, but what is security? My definition of this is it's an internal feeling. It's an internal knowing your state. It's the solidness with which you feel equal to what comes at you. That applies in your personal life. That applies in information security, in the business, if you're looking at vulnerabilities. Still, how I define that is, for you, your company, your clients, what you are going after is that they have a general feeling of being equal to what is going to come at them. Also at GERCON, investigator Chick had a talk on a theme of fear hacking the paradigm. She said, rail against the idea that one thing fixes all. This is very true. For your clients, for your customers, for the people that you interact with, steer them away. There is no one thing they're going to buy and it's going to fix all of their security concerns for their companies, for their employees, for the adversarial threats that are out there. But when she brought that up, it really struck me hard, because I want you to rail against thinking that you don't already have the one thing you need to be secure. Security all comes from that internal feeling. So don't discount that you have what will take, no matter what you're facing, something at work or something in your personal life. Also at GERCON, Side Dragon, Chris Roberts said, if we fail, people die. Now, I don't actually know exactly what he referred to here. I don't know the exact use case of this, but he does have 30 plus years in information security, is an expert in the subject, and he really pushes that InfoSec professionals do better. So my thought on that is, well, if those are the stakes that you are facing and you are choosing to be in this industry, then I think you need to know just how resilient and capable people naturally are. Okay, so have you ever had a serious close call? Have you ever had something happen when you go, wow, if just this had been different, my life would have changed? Or if just this had happened differently, man, I would have lost my house, my job, my car, my family. And if it's very serious, you could have lost your life. If you think back on those moments, think of those near misses that still stay with you now. Okay, so I wasn't lucky. It wasn't just a close call. What I went through was worst case scenario again and again and again and again. As it says, I was wiped to the abilities of a 6-month-old. And yeah, I died several times through this whole process. Right here, I want to stop and to make, I guess, a PSA about that. When you are going through things, the recovery time that is down is not equal to that this was how severe something was. So if you are doing incident response, or if you are dealing with something personally, just because whatever you faced only took a day or a few weeks or a couple months, or it was never even discussed again doesn't mean it didn't have impact. So as I said, it wasn't just a close call. It was horrible again and again and again, and yet here I am. So how or why? How does that happen? When I think about that, I have to go back through my life and think about all those moments and all those choices that helped me build courage. So this is a listing of things that I faced, that I have had to deal with in my lifetime. What I'd like is for you to look, see things, if there's anything that jumps out at you, something that you've had to face or that you've gone through already. Pay attention to that and to the skill and ability that you have developed because of facing those. So this, I didn't have any background or history in dealing with brainstem injuries. I didn't have a technical background. I didn't have a therapy background. I didn't have a medical knowledge background. So when what happened to me happened, it's not as if I could just go, oh yeah, I know exactly what resources to go for here. No, I had to pull from what was there. Same thing whenever you encounter an O-Day or you have a breach or you're going through something massive, it's what you already have with you is what will help you. So my objective here, we're going to highlight how safe we really are. We're at all these security conferences and yet very few talk about like just go ahead and feeling safe. Right now, we're safe. In this room, we're safe. Again, security equals the solidness and feeling equal to what may come. That is my definition for security. So here's the really, really, really good thing. Humans, even when wiped to almost nothing, rule. If you noticed that quote I had at the very first slide from Dave Kennedy, so at GERCON in one of his talks, or his talk there, he brought up how it's never the software, it's never the AI, and it's never the machine learning that takes him down while hacking. It's always a human. So what does that mean for us? What good thing does that mean for each of you? I think you're all mostly human. That means you pretty much mostly rule, right? So the timeline for this talk, we're going to have a video of about 21 months into my recovery. Then we're going to discuss the life before the O-Day, from the O-Day to that video. It's about 2-year time period. I'm going to talk about the tools that courage let me utilize, challenges, hacking, and reverse engineering my way out of that neurological and physical condition, and how flexibility and resources helped. So before we go on again, breathe. If you take nothing else from this talk, take away the power of your breath. Take away that it does have complete power. And this is something else that I have to remind myself constantly through thousands of hours of laying in dark silence and rebuilding how to move a finger or to even know I had one. The slow way is the fast way. We are all about hacking. We are all about getting through time efficiency, material efficiency, all of that. We do that constantly. And I want to show you from my experience how going the absolute slowest way actually allowed me to recover in ways they never thought was possible, or in a time period that was not even conceivable. Okay, video time. Sorry, just a minute. Hey, on my test runs, the audio was good. Where's the AV? It's coming out of the projector? Oh. He's getting it? Okay. So while they're looking into the audio working, I'll go ahead and say, like, what happened basically that caused the injuries. I'm not going to go into long, drawn out. I don't think you should have any trigger warnings going on. But I was physically assaulted. It apparently went on for a while, but all I really remember was getting away. I have flashes of getting away, and then was in the hospital for months and months and months. So apparently being strangled tore an artery. It caused a left vertebral arterial dissection, and that created a blood clot that started breaking off. So aside from having other physical injuries, the internal strokes, there was brainstem stroke and then several cerebellar strokes. So to give you a little bit of an idea, I ended up being in the hospital and going through this in Arizona, and it's still used as a teaching case right now because they'd never had somebody survive a brainstem stroke. It became actually really difficult to get care or therapy because it was unknown, and doctors and therapists wouldn't take on the responsibility because there was no precedent for it. The few people that had survived generally stayed completely locked in, which I was for a time, but internally, even though I was wiped and had no voice and didn't understand words and couldn't do all that, there was over time impulses and things started to make sense, and that is what I started to build from internally. I'm going to try this again. So this video obviously shows almost 2 years into recovery. Without audio, I'm just going to tell you what's happening. So I'm saying my brain feels slow and fatigued. I don't think you can hear much of what's going on there. So we can play it if you want to just watch it, but this was in another nursing home. This was about 2 years into it. I was in a nursing home, and the key point and takeaway from this is what you were seeing there is absolute peak operating. At that point, me saying 8 words, I would have to spend tens and 20s of hours trying to figure out different words to say, and I would practice for days upon days upon days upon days upon days to try to say it. So what you're seeing here is that as I'm in the nursing home, I'm sitting up because they propped me up and everything. My left side was still completely dead and gone. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. This is another care facility. Yeah, 2 months later, I'd been in the hospital still, back in a different care facility. Isn't even playing.
I'm sorry?
Yeah. But I don't know now, like with on time, like how I could hold the microphone up. I'm not sure actually, like if well, if I take the HDMI out, okay, we can just set aside the video. Main thing to take away is if you see it and you see the words that I'm trying to say to get through, and then compare it to this moment, hopefully you would understand how much progress has been made. So from that, and you're seeing, like, to make those few words was taking me weeks and weeks and weeks of preparation to try to speak. And that was without dressing myself, without showering, without bathing, without eating, without doing anything else. The majority of, especially the first 2 years, were in dark silence, completely flat on my back, with no sound, no music, no TV, no reading, no talking to people, nothing. There was nothing. My system was so compromised that sound would shut my heart down. And that became a huge deal whenever you're in a room, you're in a nursing home, and the water running 3 rooms away would cause my heart rate to drop to 20 or 30. And because my senses were completely aware, but my filters were all gone, and my compromised system couldn't handle any of the input. I'm sorry, I can't see how to... Okay. Now we're going to go back in time just a little bit with, you see the videos and you see how I was functioning there. And then think about how prior to that, birth to age 32, I had done a lot of things. I chose just a couple pictures to try to represent that. And I can't see why this won't go back to full screen. Sorry, is that it? The first one with the blade, that's my father, and there is a child's seat bolted into that seat on the blade. That's me. So when I say I grew up in construction, I mean it. I mean that being on heavy equipment, being in the ground, being out on job sites, that was my life from infancy on through growing up. I did a lot of traveling and a lot of volunteering. I traveled all over the place. I did a lot of work volunteering with construction projects and with speaking, a lot of French-speaking refugees and immigrants. I did a lot of work with that. This on this side is a picture of, I also did some commercial interior design. And this is a picture of one of the copper sculptures that I designed and made and they're about 12 feet tall and 5 feet wide, and there's 2 of them, and they mirror each other. This is on a project in Arizona. And to me, these both kind of symbolize like the starting of my life and then getting to do the commercial interior design and designing spaces where everybody enjoyed it and it was functional and meeting all the demands for code and for budget, all that. Getting to do something that was gorgeous and decorative and that people still enjoy were really huge to me. This thing over there, you see me, that's called an elliptigo. This is an outdoor elliptical bike. It's one of the hardest things on the entire earth to move by yourself, especially up and down hills. I lived at the beach in San Diego, and I had this, and I loved it. And so I put this here because it's a reminder to me of what I had been before and a goal. Like if I could get back, all the years of laying in the hospital and laying in the nursing homes, to me, I set something that when I can do an elliptigo again, I'll know that I have mostly returned or completely returned, or I have eclipsed what I was able to do before. The other picture to the side is a picture of my youngest sister. I adopted her when she was 13, and I raised her until she was with me until she was almost 21. We had a good relationship. We did a lot of things, but being a single parent and parenting your sibling and working and doing all the things I put this here because for those who have dealt with teenager angst, I felt like this was the only picture that kind of showed the teenager angst, because she was not an angsty teen. So this brings us to September, October 2012. And I'm going to choose October 8th, 2012 as my O-Day inside. Now, why would I choose that date? Because that was the day that the first time that one of the strokes was recognized as a stroke. I had gone through the attack. I had been moved between places, and people were saying that it was really severe flu, or that I had been mixing drugs with something that I got from somebody out in the desert, or that I was doing all these different things. And I was locked in, but I could hear everything that was going on. And before more strokes took away memory, I do remember those things. But this day, October 8th, was the first day that a stroke was recognized. And the ER doctor said, okay, we're transporting you immediately. So at that point, you can say there was concussion. I had somewhere over 5 or 6 strokes, but after a time they quit. It doesn't really matter because the protocols became all the same. So I had a mostly torn artery. I already had congenital hemiplegic migraine, which caused weakness, sensitivity, light, massive migraine attacks and everything. I was dealing with complex PTSD, now from the past and from that attack. I was extremely suicidal. And I was for many years following this. I had been before, and I remained very suicidal for a long time. And it's interesting. It's interesting to fight to live whenever really what you feel is all you want to do is die. But here we were, and for some reason there was that thing inside me that honestly I didn't know I was allowed to die. I didn't know that that was even an option. I thought this was simply something I'd been presented with that now had to be figured out as quickly as could be. So I had, insurance was set to take effect October 20th. This happened, so October 8th, so there was no insurance to cover it. I was out of work, there was no money, and I was completely isolated. So if you are looking at an O-Day experience, or you're going through hack the box, you want to do anything like that, this is what we're taking as like, this was my O-Day, this was the presenting situation. So what did I choose to do with it? And if at any time you have questions, please speak up. I'm going to try to describe it just a little bit. If you want to try to put yourself in my shoes for what it was like to be in that situation, my power of attorney described it as all of my insides were on the outside and they're screaming. And that's pretty much exactly what it was like, constantly. So it was like that, but it was also on a nonstop tilt-a-whirl that turned sideways, and it moved upside down because I had lost all spatial awareness, all awareness of my body. I had no understanding of if I was on the ceiling or the floor or on a wall or where anything was. Pain and nausea were constant every second. I couldn't tell if I had limbs. I couldn't make sense of stuff. I knew it was life or death. I definitely knew that. And I was locked in with about a 3-second memory for quite some time. That's about how long my memory was. So trying, put yourself in that, and these are your parameters, and this is where you want to get to. How do I do that? Oops. Breathe. So, breath was what I had. There wasn't anything else. Any challenge that you are facing, you have the exact same thing. You have breath. And if you don't have breath, then you probably don't have a challenge anymore. That may sound cruel, but it's true. So if you still have breath, you can overcome. So put this here because we're discussing now between the time of this injury up to that video, I was at best externally a cave woman, at best. And internally, what was the weird thing, like because there was no internal voice and words didn't really make sense, internally, it would be like, want, and that's all that would go on again and again and again and again. And so eventually, over weeks and months, got to where it'd be like, oh, I want water. But internally, want, water. Great. So now I know I want water, and I'm locked in. I can't form words. I can't tell anybody what is going on. What do I do? Other point on this is really you get to the point where you do not care about appearances or what you look like to other people. Like if you ever thought you did not care, you get to this level and there is no caring of anything at all. I was completely dependent. So if you were thinking of this and you're thinking, okay, this is where we're faced with, this is what we're going to do, I'll get up and I'll do this, or I'll look this up, or I'll do that, or I can take care of this. No, what I had was what was internal. I was completely dependent on the external world to provide for me, but I couldn't then go out and just get more information or even tell them what was going on inside. And I couldn't be moved. Because of how the artery was torn and all that, physically I couldn't be moved, but then also I couldn't move anything except an eye. So it didn't really matter, but I couldn't be moved, like to another facility, to some other place to go to. So in that situation, what did courage that I had already built previously allow me to see? What advantages did I finally find because I had the courage to look? So here's some principles and tools that came up over the months and over the years. First, think God's thoughts, and again, I didn't have a technical background, but I would try to think mainframe thoughts. So instead of thinking about what was going on internally or what I couldn't overcome, I would try my hardest to think from like a God view on what was being seen. What was externally representing. And I had done a lot of isometric drawings and doing drawing plans and stuff. So doing things from an external view made sense to me. It also kept me from pitying myself too much or from just giving in to the sheer horrific terror and pain. So I would try to think of the biggest thoughts that I could, an impression, and a lot of times there weren't words, it was just a view, it was just an image. Next big thing that really mattered was that I had to take the attitude, or I did. No one owes me a single thing to make my life more convenient. Nobody owes me anything to make it better. If they do something that makes it better or more convenient or helps me, wonderful. That's amazing. I love it. And I draw strength and care and love and wonderfulness from that. But I am not owed a thing. And it does not matter what the relationship is. Through most of this, I was completely alone. There was no family with me. I didn't have a mate or a partner or anybody else. So I did have a good group of friends and people I had volunteered with. There were people who came to visit, but there was nobody who was invested in the day, minute by minute, of what I was going through. So that required then that I took a certain kind of responsibility that I think a lot of people, when you are facing especially health crises, you don't take because you're in so much pain and you just want somebody to help you. I kind of tried to switch that in my mind to make sure that I knew I could get more. And I wanted it, but I was not dependent on other people. So I used humor. Humor was, in fact, as the strokes were happening and I couldn't stop that, the one thing I zeroed in on, the only thing I didn't want to lose was humor. Because I figured if I was going to be a vegetable, I was going to be a funny vegetable. And if there are, alien beings scanning my brainwaves, or if there are angels who are listening, or there are other people, I want them to die laughing because I'm being a great funny vegetable. So prior to that, I did have a years-long spiritual practice. Being able to meditate, to silence my mind, to pray, to focus, to journal, all that, I had done that my entire life. If I had not, there's no way I would have gotten through the mental hell that being so isolated was. It also allowed me to work with my body much more quickly than perhaps I would have otherwise. So thinking about those were the tools I had, and I had breath, I had my tongue against my teeth, I could control my tongue, and I had, because of that, muscle resistance. Those were my baseline starting tools. So purpose, or my end goal. First, I didn't know I was allowed to die. So I can't say that it was some grand, I will live, I will conquer this. It was, this is a presenting thing we've got to figure out how to get through. And I'm not willing to let this be the rest of my life. So I wanted it done efficiently. I wanted to be able to return to the beach, to riding that elliptigo. I needed to find a way out. I had to make connection. So many of these talks and these things that we go through within the industry and as humans, we constantly talk, whether it's about networking, the computer, or networking as a human, it's all about making connection. And I wanted to prove that all fluff people might have thought was just purely external. Internally, there was no fluff. But I had to know what was going on inside. How was I going to do that? There was this cloud of overwhelming data. As I mentioned before, whenever your senses have all their filters stripped and your brain, the processing part, is compromised, it's overwhelming data. There's just stuff coming at you that nothing can process, and you don't know how to categorize it or deal with it. I did learn very well, though. If you don't know what to do, it's the wrong time to act. Just wait. Same thing in your job, in your life, and all that. If you don't know what to do clearly and you feel like, heck yes, this is what I'm going to do right now, you are the wrong person to be making the choice. Give yourself a minute. It might only take 30 seconds and the thought will come to you, and it might take weeks or months or years, as it did for me, but it's the wrong time to act whenever you don't know what to do. Eventually, what surfaced for me was a story from my childhood. And it was this old prospector, a gold prospector, who used to come and hang out with my dad at times. This prospector would go out into the desert, into the hills, and he would pan for gold and other precious metals, all kinds of precious metals. What returned to me, one of the first things that returned to me, was him talking to me about how he would separate out the metals. He had developed a system using a super bouncy ball on a string as a pendulum. He created a pendulum, and then he had figured out within his system what the frequency was of that metal by how many times his body moved that string, and he would count those. And because he had figured out and tuned into his body that much, he could break it down with what metals he was actually had, and then he could take it to the assay office and have it broken down, and they could confirm that he had done this accurately. He got to where he could also test out what the percentage of each metal that was in perhaps a lump of ore that he had. I remembered that because I remember him talking about everything has frequency, everything has an electrical current, and everything in your body will always use it slightly differently than anybody else's body. So it will be particular to you. So I remembered that idea of an electrical current. I had my tongue, which means I had muscle resistance. This was my thought, was that a closed circuit is good, strong, right, or on. The muscle stays strong. Anyone familiar with applied kinesiology will understand this concept, or muscle checking or muscle testing. I figured then that the one thing I had was my electrical system working internally, and that I could harness that by using my tongue pressure against my teeth. So I would press, let's say one of the techs or the doctors or nurses walked in and they asked me a question, and my consciousness was so, or my brain was so injured that I couldn't consciously comprehend what they were saying. I had a lot of trust that somewhere in my body it was understood. I may not be able to access it, but somewhere in me it was understood. So if it was understood and my muscle could create a closed electrical system, if my tongue stayed strong, I said yes. That's what it came down to. If my tongue was strong, I said yes. I'd have no idea what was coming. I wouldn't know if they were going to bring me food. I wouldn't know if they were going to bathe me. I wouldn't know if we were going for testing. I may not have a clue what else was happening, but I had used my tongue and I would say yes or no based on that muscle resistance. So for you too, I think trusting yourself, getting to that core part of trusting you is what will save you a lot of energy. I had to wrangle the cloud, and I did it what I call analog binary style. Over these months, weeks, days, and years, I would lay there and I would separate out one impulse or one feeling or one thing that I could zero out from the rest. And I started creating a system, a network, like a framework. And I started separating out what was words, what was emotions, what was intentions. And it's incredibly complex to think about, but that was what I did. So then if something came up or if I felt something, I would simply muscle check using my tongue and then eventually my hands or something else to know where to categorize stuff. And because I started categorizing and knowing how, then figuring out how memory and stuff worked, everything is grouped basically for me by an underlying emotional current, the thread or connector of an emotion or a feeling or a response. So I started grouping things that way. These were the main categories that they would go into. Everything as I felt it or heard it or would try to figure out what a word was, it got segregated either into being mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual, and then it went through these categories and then branching into many, many other subcategories. So even though I may have just been laying there and it looked like I was just sleeping, even when I looked completely calm, I was working. I think for all of us, we should recognize that even when you're just sitting here and listening to me, you are working. You are doing many things. When you are at work, even when you just are sitting there staring off into space, you are working. Give yourself credit for all of those times. So 350,000, that's about the number of sessions that I did in that first 2 years to start learning how to form words, how to use my mouth, how to do all these different things. I did about 350,000 sessions building all the minute building blocks to be able to do so. And I did it rather obsessively. It was what I could do. And I had to have like something that, even though I couldn't go at my brainstem directly, I figured if I could free up all this other stuff, it would free up bandwidth and my body could handle the brainstem stuff. I needed to be able to handle the other stuff that was presenting. I really wanted pain to stop too. One of the biggest things I had to learn was what wasn't mine. I realized somewhere in this eventually that I was also picking up or processing a lot of stuff that wasn't mine. I wasn't responsible for it. It was somebody else's emotions or memories or their thoughts or their impact. It was their stuff, and I had to start getting really specifically brutal with segregating what was mine and what wasn't, because it still was life or death on my side. I would look for then a common electrical signature. I allowed my senses to tell me when a common electrical signature was present, and I would resegregate out my stuff to that person. So with everything that you're facing or whatever we're going through, it's important to find your motivation. as I started being able to use my limbs again, and this is a picture I did of with my dead hand laying on the thing as I started to relearn to use my other arm. This was a pencil drawing of my hand. That wasn't good enough. Like, being able to do that wasn't good enough, and I needed to relearn how to write. So what I did in one of the nursing homes was sat there, and I heard about the HGTV Dream Home, that the Dream Home contest was going on, and I sat there and I wrote out 450 entries to win that dream house. And I was like, then I'd have somewhere to live. Like, that'd be great. So I wrote out those, and something interesting, even though I'd been right-handed, relearning to write, I could only write mirror image. I could only write backwards for a long time, or upside down. I couldn't flip it over and write normally for a long time. So there were a lot of very interesting things that went on, but, and I learned how to relegate everything. Any crisis situation you're in, what do we always hear? You need to delegate. You need to delegate. Figure out how to delegate. If you learn how to recognize within you how quickly you can delegate things out, your life and your choices and reactions in any crucial or crisis time become simple. I did this physically and neurologically with relegating everything I could to what I call my subconscious. Anything that I didn't have to, because I was having to be consciously aware of my lungs, my heart, my body, like everything that was going on, how many minutes my eyes were open, all of this stuff. I relegated numbers, decisions, anything that required any amount of trust to my unconscious mind. And I would just muscle check for the answer. For an example on that, let's say that I had an overall goal of one day moving my left arm, but I would have to take inventory of exactly what my physical, mental, emotional, and I guess not just physical, but I had to take account of where I was at every given moment and go, okay, I want to move my left arm today. I can open my eyes 4 minutes every 4 hours. If I can't open my eyes, then I won't know whether or not really I'm moving my arm in the way that I want it to move. So this becomes important. I know that I can set up for 20 minutes, probably for the entire day. I can visualize this though 100 times, and then I have to sleep 16 solid hours. So I would get minute information like that and then stick to that exactly. And that was with doing nothing else. I mean, when I'm saying this wasn't added into a day, I'm saying there was nothing else going on except those things. Again, the doctors, like the heads of University of Arizona, different places, they said 2 years in, they said all that was expected from me was death. And yet, doing this system after that video point and continuing on, later on the neurologist said I did about 45 years of recovery in 5. I had setbacks. There were definitely every single minute, every single day, every week, there are huge setbacks. For you, you have setbacks. You have things that don't go the way that you want them to. Your job, your life, whatever your plans are for the weekend, you face setbacks. There are constant problems. So getting comfortable with that and realizing everybody else has setbacks too, except unless there's some kind of perfect creature that I don't know. So that's kind of all we're going to discuss on the particulars of that. I'm going to, this is a kind of a funny story. This talk does not go into how I continued with my electrical system or with my recovery. It's just about those starting, founding, like incident response type things that are needed. But going back to visit one of the hospitals, one of the nurses came over to me and she's like, okay, now can you tell me, like, who are you? I said, she's like, no, I know, like, you couldn't tell us before, but who are you? And I'm like, I don't know what that means. And it turns out that because while I was in ICU and I was in the hospital in acute care and I couldn't interact with people, about 120 different people had come to visit the hospital. And they were all people that I had volunteered with. They were all people that I had worked with out in the field, or mostly people that I had volunteered with. So being at a volunteer con like this, whether you are actively volunteering or you're attending, you're supporting it, however you are supporting it, I think it's hilarious to realize that from having done that, it improved my medical care, because all these people came to visit, and there were guys who came in full suits and ties and all that. The hospital staff assumed that I was some kind of real estate heiress. And so they tried to give like extra special good care because my lawyers and everybody were coming to see me all the time. Okay, so the reality was I was on Medicaid. I had $40 to my name. Everything was gone from when I got that. I had a pair of men's sweatpants. I had a broken bra and that $40 that somebody gave me when I left the hospital. So, if you think volunteering is just, not that big of a deal, I'm telling you it's a big deal, and you don't even realize how it's going to play out. So, to kind of summarize, when you're facing a choice or a challenge, however you define that, you rarely need more information. Seriously, guys, literally, very rarely do you need more than what is already within you. If you do, if it is a particular attack, a certain exploit or something, get that specific information. But for the most part, be happy and settled and feel secure in that pretty much anything that you will need to do, you already hold within. You need more breathing, like just chill and breathe. And let the answers surface. Don't beat yourself down. And as somebody who lived entirely in my head, and it caused me a lot of pain and problem, don't overthink. As much as you possibly can, be nice to your neurons and don't overthink. Just breathe and let the answer surface. Increase your self-trust. Know who and what you're about, what you're going for, and simplify it. Next, know what's yours. Know whether or not it's your battle to fight, and let it go if it's not. And I highly advocate for using humor. That's definitely a portion. I do not agree in belittling things or minimizing whatever you're going through, but humor has aided me. This last BSides Las Vegas, I was really fortunate, and I got to work with organizing the first hacker stand-up comedy event that took place at BSides Las Vegas this year. I also work with mental health hackers and have volunteered at a lot of other conferences and things, and I still find that, however, and I'm autistic, I'm introverted, all of that, still, humor, whatever your brand of humor is, may be what saves your life. So I definitely recommend for you right now, today, tonight, take a few seconds and write out some things that you've come through. Write out 5 things that for you were massive things that you have overcome or that you triumphed in. Then think back on that and see where the courage and the tools were. Like, how did you have the courage, or what courage can you now take from that? And see what tools did you already possess that allowed you to get through that. And again, the slow way is the fast way. Because I was willing to slow down and not force my body any more than what it took to just keep slowly improving, I was able to make recovery that was never before possible. So the slow way, as painfully slow and far away as I was from all of society for these years, the slow way is the fast way. Because now I'm definitely doing far better than what anybody in any of the hospitals or the therapist or anybody I have worked with ever thought possible. Again, so from the video time to now, I think you see there's been some improvement. I have not been on an elliptical yet. I am not at that point. I still spend about 85% of my time completely alone in silence and all that. Not because I want to be. It's not actually my preference. It's what is generally required, and I keep seeing my recovery times decrease, which is a good thing. I do recalibrate daily. Every single day is different. I have to give up plans and ideas that I held yesterday because I have to change to what is actually presenting in the moment. But I can't be afraid of losing. And for you, don't be afraid of losing. Don't be afraid of losing on anything that you want to go after. And I spoke at Diana Initiative, and somebody asked, what was the one thing that I would want other people to know? I said, if you are going through something, first of all, before anything else, figure out if you can feel love. Figure out if you ever have, and figure out how you feel it. Ask, if you want to help somebody else, one of the main things I would ask them is ask them if they are capable of feeling love. It makes a huge difference. I didn't feel it for the first time until about a year and a half ago, and it makes a huge difference. So, thank you all. Hack your life and think with your body. Thank you.